Today's episode of Market Talk is brought to you in part by Growmark FS. Keeping up on the latest in ag is a challenge to say the least, but there are experts nearby ready to help. You'll find them at your local FS. You can trust them to bring you customized agronomic grain and energy solutions born of the latest thinking. That's because FS specialists receive continuous training that keeps them current on the latest trends, practices, and technologies. So you'll get local expertise that's both exceptional and up to date. Visit fssystem.com to learn how FS is bringing you what's next. And good afternoon. Welcome into Market Talk for this Tuesday, August 3rd. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Great to be here with you once again. MarketTalkAg.com. That's our home on the web. MarketTalkAg.com. That's where you could find us, find all our streaming sources, our radio affiliates, and so much more. Just go to that website, MarketTalkAg.com. We got a lot to talk about today. Pretty much an implosion, so to speak, in the soybean market here. A lot of factors there to discuss. We'll bring in our good friend Matt Bennett with agmarket.net joining us here this afternoon. Matt, great to have you back on. Soybeans, definitely this place to start here today. Just a rough day overall. I was surprised. We saw the crop rating go up a couple points, but I know the weather forecast talking more rain in the 6 to 10 day seemed like all those factors together just made people run for the hills. The sellers were out in big fashion today.
Yeah, I mean, basically you come in yesterday afternoon, and I think the trade was pretty much expecting, maybe a point drop in ratings. I thought that, it made sense. I mean, quite frankly, the weather hasn't exactly been ideal. We've had this little cool down, which I think has been nice for some folks. Maybe the beans were able to kind of catch their breath, wait on rain a little bit longer in those areas that really needed the rain. But yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise to get that 60%. And so as far as corn was concerned, you actually dropped ratings, and the overnight markets, were kind of lending themselves to some weakness on beans more so than corn, relatively speaking, definitely more than what you saw in the corn market. You come in here during the day session, and a couple of forecasts first thing this morning, they were showing some rainfall, but I think then we built on that just a little bit more yet. On some of the 11 o'clock maps, noon maps, you call them what you want. But regardless, whenever you inject rain in the month of August, there's no question, especially whenever you're trading 13 plus beans, it's just really hard to think that you're not going to fall back at some point. It's an interesting market, though. It's extremely tight. We know that. But at the same time, I've been telling people a lot lately, remember, this is a futures market. And so, even if our crop isn't stellar, you got to think, what are the South American growers going to do with $13 beans? And they're probably going to plant every bean they can possibly plant.
Definitely. Well, and, we think about the rain in the forecast. We have a lot of that acreage up in the Dakotas and Minnesota for soybeans. And obviously, we know that typically this bean crop is made in August. It just seems like maybe, I don't know, the weather market we've been trading has been very, very interesting. It's been interesting on the corn side, and it almost feels like we've gotten a little complacent with the weather trading here lately. But on the soybean side, of course, these next couple of weeks going to be very, very telling. And I'm curious. I've heard some disease issues in the East, but maybe that story is not being talked about a ton. I'm very curious the next 7 to 10 days, 14 days, what we end up actually getting for rainfall, if it's verified, and then where the soybean market could go from there. But I know we did break down through some moving averages today, so that's a little concerning, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, here lately, a couple times, it looked like corn had kind of broke out to the upside of some moving averages, and then we come back down through them. Soybeans, you kind of feel like we're going to bounce off some of this support like we've done so much lately. I mean, these have been range-bound markets for, good Lord, several weeks. And so, basically, my thought process, you come in here in August, if you have above average rainfall, it's going to be really tough to think that we could rally much. At the same time, this market is just a really bizarre market. I think very much weakness at all. And we've seen some of these daily sales actually lately trickle in the morning. Now, people aren't paying attention to them because they're not corn's 1.5 million tons, but 132K at a time, it adds up after a while. And so, we've actually had some sales in here, and I think you'll continue to see sales, especially if this market continues to be a little bit of blasé action. But I don't know, on soybeans, I can't get bullish personally in this camp. As a producer in Central Illinois, we're sitting on a pretty good crop. We've built the plant. There's lots of pods there. Do we need another rain? Yeah, you need another rain to have a really stellar, big time crop. But at the same time, I think we've got a crop at this stage of the game. So, can you sell $13.20 or 60 cent yesterday beans and make money? Yes, you can. And so we got to pay close attention to that and keep it simple because trying to figure out this bean market is next to impossible.
On the corn side, a little bit deeper here, we've been trading right around 550, it seems, for weeks. We've been locked in this range. Been talking the weather market. I mentioned maybe getting a little complacent with the weather. We keep hearing hot, dry, hot, dry, hot, dry, and the market really not breaking out to the upside a ton. It just settles in this range. I'm starting to hear on the weather front, more Minnesota, Iowa, some tip back issues in corn, especially Minnesota, seeing the pictures on social media. But I feel like some of those stories maybe not being talked about with the weather. What are your thoughts on this corn market and just this range we're in and the whole weather situation now that we flipped the calendar to August?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you pretty much look up. It seems like if you step away from the market, it's almost like some of these people that, and I'm not picking on them, but people that watch soap operas, they say that, whenever they go back, the same thing was going on that they saw 3, 4, 5, 6 days ago. D's 550 corn's pretty much where we've been for a while. I mean, we've been on both sides of it. We've traded up through it. We were 565 earlier today, but you settle the market for 551 and 3/4. In my opinion, range bound's going to be the name of the game. You're right. There's definitely some issues. I was just I had to go over and do market to market last week. And so I got out. We're just opening a new office over there, and we went out driving around, talking to folks, looking at crops there Friday morning. And I'll tell you what, it was fairly green out, but every producer I talked to said, we're dry. We're trending dry. We need a rain if we're going to have big crops. And so, I think that the bean market or the bean crop could definitely be hurt more. And as well as I do, there's a lot more beans in that part of the world this year where the derecho went through. But the corn looks good. It just needs some rain. And I think whether you're talking Iowa, if I'd have gone north of that 2 or 3, 4 more counties, things changed drastically. And so you got to keep in mind in northwestern Iowa into Minnesota, parts of the Dakotas, especially North Dakota, their topsoil moisture deficit is just extravagant. Now, with these hybrids, can you get a soaking rain this time of year and change your, change the trajectory of your crop pretty rapidly? Yeah, but you're probably still going to have a pretty good yield drag whenever you've done some damage to the plant. And we all know corn early on, you can certainly damage your yield aspirations.
I know on Twitter you've been asking folks about their thoughts on how big this corn crop could be nationally this year, and I know you updated your poll again, took a new survey here earlier this week, and obviously USDA is at that 179.5 mark. I don't know many people who are in agreement with USDA at this point, but we were chatting before we got on the air. I'm more in the 172, 176 category. I think just the crops in the East are going to be very big. What are your thoughts on where this yield could be going? And obviously, I know we're waiting on more data here as we get through the next couple of weeks with all the various crop tours and everything else coming up, Matt.
Yeah, I'd say that, you're in the range that most people are in. Okay. My personal opinion on corn yield here in the US, if you get a 177 yield, it's record. Okay. And so people say 177, that doesn't sound like a very good yield because they're here people throw 180, 181, 182. Are those types of yields possible? I'm not going to rule them out just simply due to the fact that where I'm at over into Indiana, I think Indiana could be a record crop for the whole state. I think it's probably a record crop just from what I've gathered. I think there's a pretty good chunk of Ohio where you're going to see some record yields as well. And then I think there's a lot of Illinois we're going to see some record yields. I feel like these crop condition scores, Illinois, I believe 64 or 5%, somewhere in there. I don't see it. I think that it's better than that. And so Yes, the whole state's not great top to bottom. There are some holes. We've had some big rains. There's no question. But you talk to a lot of producers who've gone out and done yield checks. And typically, people are going to want to brag and talk about how good things could be. But whenever you're helping folks sell, figure out their marketing plan, and they call you and they say, hey, I need to adjust my yield up another 20 bushel. I'll tell you what, it tells me that the yield checks are certainly turning out to be pretty good. And so we've done the same thing with our own fields. I feel like you could be seeing some record, by 5, 10, 15 bushel in several areas. So it's going to be hard to handicap that crop. But with that being said, where they've been hurt, you're talking some really productive areas in Iowa and Minnesota. I mean, Iowa's typically number one, Minnesota is fourth or fifth. You're talking tons of bushels coming out of that sector of the Corn Belt. And so I have a hard time believing that, a fair amount of 250, 60 bushel corn is going to be able to cover up that, that wound that you're going to see in the Northwestern Corn Belt. So I'm still going to be 177 rate right now. If you would get this, rainfall that's been forecasted to verify, and the entire Corn Belt gets a soaking rain, that's probably going to add a couple 3 bushel. But if you don't, I'll tell you what, I think we're going to end up in your category, probably in that mid 170s thing.
Well, I think a lot of the trade is just kind of waiting right now, whether we're talking corn or beans, to be honest, and just waiting to see what happens the next couple of weeks, because, it almost seems like the trade doesn't know what to do. Do we lean bullish? Do we lean bearish? Do we see some upside movement in these prices?
Right.
Where do we go? And I feel like that's just something that producers, when they're looking at their marketing plan right now, they're going to have to wrestle with that. But also remember that, look at where things stand right now. There is some good profitability out there.
Right. And so let's think about something, Jesse. Last year, the USDA called it a 180 crop and change. This year, there's a chance that they're going to come in somewhere in there, but a year ago at this time, you were looking at about 360 corn on the board, and you're looking at 550 corn today. And so you got $1.90 higher prices, and I know folks are saying, well, I can't do anything because I don't know what kind of crop I'm going to have. And I pity those of you who have not gotten the rain. I'm not trying to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. But there were some people that didn't get the rain last year that were trying to figure out what to do with 360 corn. So you've got 550 corn. If you don't know what you want to do, sell at $1.50 higher than what you were hoping to sell for several months ago. Quite frankly, or lock it in, put a floor under the market, $1.50 higher, at that $5 level, whatever. Don't invest a fortune in it, but put some sort of a floor in there. And then if you were a producer or are a producer in the situation where you've raised, a pretty good crop, you've got it close to the finish line, you feel really good about production, go ahead and sell a few more bushels of physical production. Keep in mind that it's never done until it's in the bin. Remember what happened mid-August last year in Iowa, just as a terrible event. It can happen again this year. So do you want to go out and sell 200 bushel an acre if you think you got a 250 bushel crop? That's probably not real smart, but there's a lot of things you can do to protect these prices at the same time.
Great advice. The wheat markets here real quick. They were the leader on Monday and tried to hang in there the best they could today. I know KC wheat ended up finishing slightly higher. Just some slight losses in Chicago wheat and in spring wheat, of course. But any thoughts on the wheat market? We've been hearing declining production in the Black Sea region. Obviously, the spring wheat crop here, the U.S. and Canada, is dismal, to say the least. Any thoughts on this wheat market here moving forward, Matt?
Yeah, total wheat crop for the U.S. and Canada is going to be lower, most likely. In a fair bit. We kind of know that. You look at the EU crop, though, and it's supposed to be pretty good size. You get over to Black Sea region, they've had way too much rain. You throw that all in together, and I think world wheat production is going to be lower. You also got to remember, though, over the last year, you've had feed wheat, cheap feed wheat, coming into these rations, and we've chewed through a fair amount of world wheat supply. And so you look at the board, and you're looking at, Chicago wheat safely above $7, 7.25, 7.40 on the March 22. I mean, you look over to July 22, you're still 7.15. And so that's a pretty darn good price for producers as they try to make decisions moving closer to fall. KC wheat, you're above $7, and then Minneapolis wheat, couple contracts over $9, or one of them anyway, and then 889, 880. So it's evidence of what we've seen, not only as a bad crop this year, but a little bit of a retraction in supply. And so, it's a really good thing, I guess, to be able to be led, as you said earlier in the week, by wheat, because typically in early August, wheat's not leading the charge. And so I think that it kind of spilled over a little bit, especially to corn, getting a little bit of help there. But at the same time, you come in on a day like today, and I just don't think there was enough of a story for wheat to really do anything. You couldn't really put your finger on anything too exciting, and path of least resistance, given the prices we're already looking at, is probably lower.
Let's talk livestock, Matt. Hog market, it feels like I turned the clock back a couple months here. We've been having some good strength these first couple days of this week, and I'm really curious your thoughts on this hog market and what we're seeing. Is this just a short-term rally, or is this the sign of something else on the charts?
Well, my personal opinion is it's a short-term rally, but again, Jesse, we've talked hogs several times, and good Lord, I'm glad I wasn't trading hogs this year, because I'd have gotten my lunch handed to me. But because I felt like $80 hogs were too high there for a while, and I felt like $90 hogs were too high, and felt like $1 hogs were too high. And then you look up today, and you've got August there at 109. But I know that we're getting ready to be done with the August. But I mean, you get out here, and you're still looking at $91 hogs. Whenever you move out into the fall time frame. So my personal opinion here, I think that demand's going to stay pretty constant. We know darn good and well that whenever you look at what's going on in China, I mean, their appetite for pork is just insatiable. No question about it. One thing I'm a bit concerned about for some of the producers is what's going on in California. I certainly hope that they're able to rectify and find some sort of common ground to where the pork is going to be able to find its way. I mean, if you're in California and you're paying twice for bacon, I think, me personally, I'm still going to buy the bacon, but not everyone's going to. And I believe I saw that California consumes 15% of the country's pork. So we have to certainly hope for our pork producers here in the U.S. that especially a lot of that comes right out of the state of Iowa. I hope for their sake that they're able to find some common ground there.
On the cattle side, some good support here this week as well. And, looking at this cattle market, you and I have talked about it many times as well. And I know you've been fairly friendly cattle, for a few months here, at least looking at the potential down the road.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on this cattle market right now, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're low to mid 120s, on the front month, 128, you get out to fall, D's 133. All those levels, to me, you've got healthy carry in the market. They seem to be fairly priced. One thing that concerns me just a shade when we're talking about the entire cattle situation is I talked about this a little on market to market as well. I mean, you can't get a deal on feeders right now. I know on the board they're showing 158, but go try to buy them for that at the sale barn, because you're not going to find them. This feeder market is on fire. And I'm a little bit concerned that, some of these producers are going to have a hard time if they don't lock in feed costs. And let's say that we don't get this rain, and then we end up with a dry August. I think if you get any strength at all in the bean market, you're going to see it in the corn market. It seems to me like the corn market wants to rally more than beans anyway. So as a cattle producer, you got to be concerned. But $137, $139 fats. If I'm a producer that has my costs defined, or I'm raising my own corn, I think we need to be at least hedging off some risks there, because those are pretty salty levels for fats to be at.
And lastly here, Matt, before we wrap up today, the outside markets, we should touch on those. I know the Dow's made some recent record highs, and we've looked at some strength there, but crude oil's been down a bit this week. I mean, looking at these outside markets, any thoughts you have there and how they're affecting commodities?
Well, I think my biggest concern, and I just wanted to look at them again just to make sure, but, the Dow is pushing back up on 35,000. I'm not super worried whenever it comes to the Dow. I think my concern, in totality for most of us agricultural producers is just watching energy. Energy's certainly having a bit of a tough time. I know I was asked this last weekend, would you lock in energy costs? And I said, I think the time for that was a long time ago, and I don't want to be locking in at $73 and $74 crude. All things considered, I know most of us don't lock in via crude, but regardless, to me, that seems fairly rich, especially with OPEC talking about increasing some production. I just don't see this oil market or energy market as a whole being super strong for some time. Hopefully we can have some stability there. I think you got to keep a very close eye on the dollar and what it's doing. And today, I mean, really the dollar didn't hardly move, but regardless, you got to keep a close eye there because, if this dollar would rally much, it certainly could provide some headwinds whenever we get into a time of, not a whole lot of news, if you will.
Matt, any final thoughts? Anything else you want to reiterate for us here real quick?
Well, it's just you're a month until harvest for a lot of folks, at least getting started. So as always, just watch your bottom lines and don't overcomplicate this. We're sitting at extremely good price levels. And if you go ahead and make a bunch of sales at this price, and the market goes up 50 cents and you made $400 or $500 an acre from income, let's not complain about it. I think that we sometimes make these things a little too complicated.
Well, Matt, I know you guys got a great team there at agmarket.net. You have the app available as well, and a lot of different resources for farmers and ranchers to check out if they need some advice, don't you?
Absolutely. And then we just hired Betsy Gibbon. I know a lot of people saw that. And I'll tell you what, it's a huge hire for us. We're super excited to get her on our team and to be able to promote everything we're doing out there in the media. So I'm sure you'll be seeing more from her as well.
Definitely. And that's, I would agree, a great hire for you guys and great to have her on your team. I'm sure agmarket.net, that is the place to go. Matt Bennett, thanks for joining us here today on Market Talk. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, bud.
MarketTalkAg.com. That's our website. The show today brought to you by Growmark FS. Find us online again on our website, MarketTalkAg.com. This has been the Tuesday, August 3rd edition of Market Talk. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.